Okay, with that, we'll call, looks like we have just enough in here to start. We'll call House Rev and Tax to order today. I know we're all excited to get going again where we left off last week. We do have a short, quick motion from Representative Anderegg.
Yeah, I move that we approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Have a motion that we approve the minutes from March 1st. You should have those in front of you. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and place it. All those in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, they're approved. Okay, with that, we're going to return back to where we were on HB 98 with Representative King. We had just finished taking quite a bit public comment on that particular bill. Is there anyone here today that would like to speak to that again that didn't get a chance to have their viewpoint heard on Friday? One, I think we can do one. Why don't you go ahead and come up, and we'll go ahead and pick up where we left off. Go ahead. So you notice that we have a shot clock today for everyone. That's going to start at 2 minutes. If we start getting into the 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night time frame, that shot clock will go down in length. And just keep an eye. That means go, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jeff Hartley. I represent a few energy companies here in the state of Utah that pay severance taxes. I just wanted to reiterate for the committee that in this state, the cost of doing business is higher than elsewhere. The resource is harder to get to in terms of geography. The ability to get that product to market is more expensive, whether it's gas or oil. And the cost for these companies is higher in Utah than elsewhere. You also need to factor in, especially when you're looking at taxes, the whole tax picture. In some states, there are no sales taxes. In some states, there are no income taxes. In some states, you get a waiver on your severance tax if you have one of the previous taxes. Every tax structure is different, and unless you're looking at the whole, it's not a fair composite picture. The data that I've seen indicates that among the top 10 energy-producing states, Utah is the most expensive, or it's one of two most expensive. The cost is significant here. What will happen if we impact these companies that pay the taxes adversely is they will, as was mentioned last week when we had this hearing, capital is scared, it's a coward, and it will follow the path of least resistance. And these companies will move their rigs and they will move their business to private lands in other states where it's easier to do business, where there's abundant resource, and where they can make more money. Utah's interest in keeping that severance tax here is great, and I would encourage you to not raise severance taxes and not chase those jobs and those revenues that the state benefits from and local governments benefit from away. Thank you.
Thank you. 5 seconds for a last second shot. Thank you. With that, we'll return to the committee for comment or action. Anyone? Okay, Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since I'm a member of the committee, I think I can make the motion to move out HB 98 with a favorable recommendation.
I assume you'd like to speak to that.
I would.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I thought was interesting in the discussion that we had about this bill last week is the comment from Dr. Lozada about the fact that the increase that we're talking about, the primary concern or the primary issue that I think was raised by a number of the folks who testified was, you know, this is a significant increase from 3 to 5%. To make it a single rate at 5% rather than this dual rate structure we have now. However, I thought it was interesting that we did hear some people say that this is a relatively small component of what they take into account when they figure what their costs of doing business are. Is it true that they take it into account, or is it true that it's a cost of business? Yes, sure. But it's not a significant one, even by the testimony of the individuals within the industry. I thought it was interesting, too, Dr. Lozada's testimony about the impact that raising the severance tax would have on the behavior of these oil and gas companies. Of course, we're all interested in. Questions were raised about that. Dr. Lozada directed his remarks to that very specifically because his study from 2 or 3 years ago looked at that specifically and determined that it would have a minimal impact. And his study was based on numbers. His study was not just some sort of statistical study that was based on private interest backing. It didn't have an agenda behind it. It was a study that was the best effort asked for by the legislature to come up with the best estimate that could be arrived at as to what the impact of increasing the severance tax was. And Dr. Lozada's study said that it would be minimal. So I think we've already got information about that. It's a very relevant question, I'd agree. But I don't think that there's too much question that we have information from a good source that says that it would be minimal. On the other side, the counterweight to that is you've got people within the industry saying, oh, it would have a big impact, it would affect us. These two studies, these two opinions, I would suggest and argue, are just not, we shouldn't be counting them and weighting them equally. Of course the interests of the industry are going to say that. They don't want taxes raised. I wouldn't either if I were them. But that's not what's in the best interest of Utahns, and it's certainly not what's in the best interest of our school kids. And so when we're talking about allocating more money for public education, I think that's very important. One final thing that I would say is this difference in the dual rate structure, the difference between 3% and 5%, only applies on the first $13 of income or of revenue generated for oil and natural gas. That's a relatively small amount when you look at the oil per the price per barrel of oil is what, $70, $80, $90. So it's incrementally a relatively small amount for the industry. But when you add it up together, you saw the fiscal note. The fiscal note's significant on this. So the bottom line is it's a relatively painless way of extracting relatively significant dollars to educate our kids and to help educate our kids. So I'd request the committee's support for the bill. I think it is certainly something that both the business community and those who have studied it from an impartial perspective have recommended that we do.
Thank you, Representative. We have a comment from Representative Sagers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late. Over the years, I've watched the bust and boom cycle out in the Uinta Basin, and it seems like it's a cycle that occurs every so often. We've heard testimony that the product that we produce out there from these oil wells is marginal or thick. I don't remember the exact term. And when you compound that with logistical problems they face of getting that product to an area while it's still warm enough to flow, I have to wonder, we're talking about a small dollar amount, what's the impact of that going to be? Furthermore, since I've been here for 3 whole years, the question of education is continually come up, and yet we fail to deal with it, in my estimation, in any broad process. We talk about taxing individual entities or whatever else. I would submit perhaps the best thing to do is to pass a joint resolution by both houses asking the voters if they're willing to raise property tax to fund education. I believe those funds are dedicated for that very purpose. I think that would, for once and for all, address the concerns we all have. Thank you.
Thanks, Representative. Representative Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, I want to respond to the statement that says this raises significant dollars but doesn't have significant impact. There's a disconnect there in my mind. We can't raise significant money without taking that money out of the economy, and the more we take out, the more impact that is, no matter how slightly how carefully we divide it. As we think about the negative impact and how much that is, I just want to state it's a little bit like my saying, if I just stab you once and not too deeply, I don't twist the knife, I don't think it'll hurt much. It won't do too much trouble, will it? You can't stab someone without creating damage. And we can't take resources out of the economy and out of those that have places, other places than Utah to put their resources. We can't take those resources out without it having an impact commensurate with the benefit we get from it, the dollars that we come out of it. There are no free lunches in my view, so I oppose this this motion. I don't believe this is the right place to go.
Hey, thank you, Representative. Seeing no further lights, you guys return back to the sponsor and the maker of the motion for summation.
Thank you. I'll waive.
Okay, with that, we'll place the vote. All those in favor of passing HB 98, the favorable recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Nay. Will the ayes please raise their hand? Representative King, Representative Cosgrove, Representative Briscoe. That measure fails. Thank you, Representative.